Welcome, guys. Welcome to 2025. I don't know about you, but if you were over the holidays thinking about how the heck we got here, I'm still stunned. I feel like I'm still 1999, not to age myself, but the world's coming to an end because of 2000. And so much has changed in 25 years. And we're going into another year that is just going to be, I think this year is just going to triple that and just be change over change over change. So hopefully you got your waders on and you're ready to dive into the deep end. And with that, let's get started, Kimberly.
All right.
All right. So
Yeah, go ahead and introduce yourself since you're
all right.
up first on the screen.
I'm Gwenevere Crary. So I am the founder and CEO of Guide to HR. I'm also the VP of Global People Operations over at Lilt. It's an AI language translation company. So a lot of fun there, especially on the AI front. And I've got 24 years, not two decades, I should say, 2 decades of years of experience, plus, not to age myself, hide the grays, and all over the place. But mostly my expertise and where I love to be in is the startup, small size businesses, building foundation of the HR world, especially in the tech space, whether it's B2B, B2C, or B2B2C. I love it all. I love all the different industries. And if you don't know me and you don't know I have a podcast, I have one. It's called Scaling with People, and it targets founders and CEOs to help them build their business. It's all kinds of experts on the call: marketing, sales, operations, finance, etc. So check it out, and I hope you can learn a little bit about how to grow and build your business. And with that, I'll hand it over to Kimberly.
So I'm a fractional general counsel and I'm a fractional CFO. So I do both finance and legal, which makes me a little bit unique. Sustainable growth is my focus. So you see a lot of these people that talk about just nonstop growth at all costs. That's not who I am, and that's not how I help companies. So sustainable growth means that you're not going to burn out and you're not going to run out of cash. And we're going to try to do it as compliance and everything the legal way. Make sure that you're good, solid foundations for that growth. So I do have to do all the fun little attorney disclaimers that this is not attorney-client privilege. There's no relationship between us because of this webinar. If you want to engage me and get specific legal advice, then email me. My contact information will be at the end. And also, some jurisdictions consider this attorney advertising. I'm just doing this for educational and informational purposes, but we gotta keep all of them happy.
What we're going to be talking about today is federal and state laws. And I will say, this is just issue spotting. This is not going to be a full comprehensive, all the things you need to know, because we would have to be here for days. So just know this is a spot. Do you know about this? Are you aware of this? And look into it further. And so we're going to dive into non-competes, DOL overtime, the benefit ownership information, the Form I-9, benefit maximums, which, that's typical fun things to talk about. And then Kimberly's going to give us a little bit of what to expect under our new president and the administration. And then we'll get into some state items, minimum wage, lots of changes there as usual. Pay transparency continues to grow. So does paid parental leave and sick leave. We also got some interesting increases in workplace violence or guns in the workplace. Heat illness prevention is starting to creep up, and then some other state-specific laws. We'll do some predictions of 2025 and take some time, hopefully, for Q&A.
All right, we're going to jump into the federal laws. All right, and I label this that the rules that the courts just don't like right now. The Biden administration was very pro-worker, and particularly our courts, federal courts in Texas, do not like the Biden administration and do not like all the rules that they have passed. So one of the big ones that got a lot of attention in 24 was the non-compete rule. And the FTC tried to say that non-competes were not enforceable, including retroactively, but even going forward. And there is currently a nationwide injunction that stops that rule, which means, kind of the double negative here, we're back to where we were. And that means that non-competes are enforceable if your state permits them. All right. So there's no federal rule banning them, but places like California, Washington, Illinois, some of these states are really against non-competes. The surprising one to me is always Oklahoma. While the FTC was going through their non-compete process, in conjunction with that, the NLRB, so the National Labor Relations Board, this is typically seen as a union enforcement agency. They came out against not only non-competes, but what they're calling stay or pay provisions. All right, and this is things like signing bonuses that you have to repay, or educational stipends that keep you there for 2 years. Things like that, they're saying, all right, those are going to be unenforceable. Now, that is more of a policy. It's not a rule. They're working on it. I don't expect the Trump administration to do anything with that, and it's going to go away. But it is worth mentioning because a lot of times states will follow some of these policy rules and they will transcend the administration that's in, president's seats. The next one, the DOL overtime rule. And this was a headache for the finance departments in particular. All right. So there was a July 1st increase that took it from the DOL overtime exemption from 35 to 43. Now, it is worth noting this is the minimum threshold for where if you paid under this, you had to pay overtime, right? So like time and a half. And then above this, you could do your salary exempt, right? So these are like the bare minimums that you have to have. You would still have the jobs test, like the duties test, that said, okay, well, what is it that you're doing? Are you doing administrative work? Okay, then you can qualify. But it was like a 2-part test. You had the salary plus you had the duties. So the salary was going up. This was going to make more people either eligible for overtime or increase their salaries. So a lot of companies were really concerned about full-time salaried employees in that $35,000 to really $60,000 range were suddenly going to become eligible for overtime. July 1st came and went. We didn't have any action, so that was increased to 43 and change. And then November happened, and there was a nationwide injunction again put on, and it actually undid not only stop the January 1st, 2025 increase, it undid the July 1st increase. So again, double negative, right? We're back to our existing $35,000 as our threshold. Now, the question is, okay, well, we increased people for July 1st. What do we do now that that's not the same? I mean, employed would be irate if they got an increase and then you're taking their salary increase away, right? Like people would quit. And so, a lot of it was trying to figure out, can we roll that back? What do we do now? I will say that most of my clients had very little impact on that July 1st deadline. All right. The nature of my clients they're typically more office-based, and a lot of their employees are getting paid in the $50,000-$55,000 range. All right. So the January 1, they were like, oh no, this one we're actually going to have to deal with, right? Nationwide injunction, they don't have to. Also, even though it's not directly employment related, one thing that we had a lot of back and forth, still having back and forth on, is the beneficial ownership information report. This was all the small businesses that had to disclose their ownership and officers to the FinCEN. And it is currently under review by the courts, and there is an temporary injunction halting the enforcement of the reporting requirement. So if you haven't reported, then right now you don't have to, but at any given moment, that could change. So you need to pay attention. Follow me on LinkedIn or Blue Sky or Threads. Not on Twitter so much anymore. But I will definitely have updates as those happen. So now we're going to talk about I-9 compliance.
Yeah, so I-9 compliance, we got a few changes here, but these are also some reminders for those that might not be familiar. And basically, the USCIS, which is the United States Citizen and Immigration Services, has expanded the expiration date of the current I-9 form from August of 23 to May 31st of 27. So first thing to know, no new form for you to go and download yet. You can continue to use that one. And then from there, make sure obviously that the employee is filling out on day 1, you're completing by day 3. And a key note is when it comes to remote verification, the only way to do it is with your E-Verify account. So if you are doing remote verification of I-9s and you're not E-verified, highly recommend that you get that account set up. It's super easy. It's not a big deal. And it actually makes your life a lot easier from an admin perspective. So if you're not E-verified yet, please recommend you check that out and look into that for your business. And then, like I said, it's you can use the current form. It's good now until 2027, and E-Verify. So this is really interesting. E-Verify by state. There are, a lot of states that you can do this for all or most of your employees or employers, excuse me. There are some states that don't require an E-Verify or a voluntary E-Verify. There are some that restrict. So what's interesting is California, Illinois have some restrictions, but they're typically on the government side, the government employer side of the house. And then there's a few that are also just specifically to public companies or contractors. So you will want to look into that in regards to what you can and can't do, but mostly you should be able to do an E-Verify and get that set up for yourself.
Yep. Really wanted to highlight the fact that I-9 compliance in 25 is going to be very important for our companies, right?
Say more. Why is that, Kimberly?
Why is that? That is because the anti-immigrant rhetoric that we're hearing from the incoming Trump administration, right? So when they are talking about all of this, we need to make sure that our companies are in compliance, because that can really hurt you. And I have to say, based off of the prior Trump administration, if you are in a blue state, especially, you need to make sure that your I's are dotted and your T's are crossed, right? And this is one of those that you really need to make sure that you have not only the I-9s on file, but you have properly filled out them and have done the verification part of it,
now,
right?
Kimberly,
That is what protects you.
I recall now, it might be more, but I recall that every field on the I-9 is about $100, maybe more now, of fees if it's not completed right. Is that what you've heard or no?
I don't remember what the fees are, but I do
But it's
know
like
that
every box is a fee category, basically. And so you definitely, it may feel burdensome and it may feel cumbersome to do, but it would behoove you, if you don't feel like you have a good grasp on your I-9s being completed accurately, you could potentially have some hefty fees if you ever were to be audited.
Yeah,
And Andrew, oh, go ahead. Yeah.
I was gonna say Andrew's is saying $272 to $2,701 per form.
Okay, so $2,700 per form times how many employees you have, and I believe it also includes some terminated employees up to a certain time frame. So that, woof, that can get pretty hefty, pretty costly, and there's some serious ROI on getting a contractor or a temp person to come in and just dot those I's and cross those T's for you.
Yep. Thanks, Andrew, for the assist there. One thing that I am seeing, kind of related to I-9 compliance, is the H-1B visas, especially in our tech companies. If you have these employees, we're seeing really the recommendations to have them back in the United States from their holiday trips by the 20th, right? Because of the rhetoric, we don't know what they're going to do right away. It is best to have people, boots on the ground, boots, on the U.S. soil before those changes happen. It's a lot harder to get people out of the country than it is to allow to keep them out, right? So if you have H-1B visa employees that are currently not on U.S. soil, you may want to talk about getting them back early. Hate to cut people's vacations short. I'm a real believer in it, but sometimes we have things
Well,
that
just
we
because they
have.
come back doesn't mean they have to go back to work. They
Right.
can
Well,
keep their
that's true.
vacation just on US soil.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
I'll take this
so,
one if you
okay,
want.
go ahead.
Yeah. So as we said, I was going to talk about the benefit limit updates. So we got several of them. Social Security tax limit has gone up. Our employee contribution limit has gone up, including our catch up. So that's exciting because that seemed like it sat there forever, never increasing. So now we're finally getting to a good catch up there. And we have a super catch up. So for your employees that are age 60 to 63, they can do even more. Which is nice if they have the money and are able to do that. And then the total contribution limit is 70,000. So and then we also have a qualified small employer health reimbursement. So just keep in mind of that if for self or a family. Really nice to be able to provide funds to our employees. It's great benefits, a great recruiting marketing strategy too.
Oh, I
And
love that benefit.
oh yeah, my husband got a new company changed over, and we're like, okay, what's the benefits going to be like? And they were like, we got this, and I was like, whoa, we got better benefits. This is great. It felt like a
Yeah.
pay raise when he did nothing. His company got
Yeah.
bought over. It was great.
This small employer health reimbursement is really great for those very small companies that can't get a good group plan,
Yeah.
right? So this allows you to have tax-free income, or not income, but a reimbursement to your employees so that they can go and get their own coverage. So you can still provide medical coverage without it being, like a taxable event and things like that. So it's just a really great way to help out your employees. You save on FICA, the employee saves on FICA. It's a great thing. So, and also update your mileage rates if you have those in your company policies. All right, talked about it a little bit. Trump administration, what are we going to expect out of this? Overall, we're going to expect to see that this is going to be this is going to be business friendly. So the Biden administration was doing a lot of pro-employee, pro-worker initiatives like that non-compete rule, the overtime exemption, very pro-union, everything like that. So we do expect it to be generally employer friendly. I will kind of put an asterisk next to that and say sometimes what helps one company hurts another company, right? So there could be some surprises in there, particularly depending on who has Trump's ear at any given time. That there's going to be some surprises thrown in. There always are, right? One of the things that will get turned back is the independent contractor rule or the test, and that again is going to go back to fewer factors, and it's going to be more employer friendly on that testing. The joint employer test has been very basically controversial lately. With this happens a lot like franchises, right? Where both McDonald's corporate and the local franchisee were both seen as a joint employer so that if there were problems, you could go after the franchisor. And you see it in some other situations too when you have very complex org charts, right? About who actually is the employer. Everything DEI is going to get rolled back, right? Which, as a woman and a big believer that diversity actually strengthens our companies, this is very disappointing for me. It is what it is. We're going to deal with it, but things that, one of the big things that we'll see is in transgender rights about things as simple as what bathrooms can they use, right? And whether it's harassment if you misgender somebody, right, with their pronouns. All of those type of things is going to be much harder to prove discrimination. You're going to get less help as an employee from the EEOC. A lot of employers will, welcome that. I also remind you, just because the feds are changing doesn't mean your state's changing, right? And
So
so
true.
I like to remind everybody my rule still is no assholes or don't be an asshole, right? Pardon the language, but that's really what HR comes down to is don't be an asshole. Um, we're not going to see much change on the minimum wage. There might be a slight increase just to, pacify the masses, but I don't see much happening there. Immigration is going to continue being an issue. If you rely on immigrant workers, you need to pay close attention to these changes, right? Um, AI been a hot topic, especially in the workplace. And I expect that it's just going to expand even more over the next 4 years. And it's going to again be on the states to regulate how AI is used in the workplace. I mean, we've already seen a lot come out of California. So I do say, you know, you've got to be very careful on how you're doing that. Um, we've got a couple of big cases coming up in the Supreme Court, right? About majority discrimination. Basically, that is your discrimination against white male workers. Uh, some wage and overtime laws about who is going to be responsible for and the fees that your 401k can charge your employees, right? And what's excessive and not excessive. So Tiffany asks about the DEI rollbacks. What can be done preemptively to protect workplaces and employees in this new administration? What we are telling everybody is focus on all things diversity, right? And that not just, hey, we want more women or we want more people of color. It's also let's look at, first time college students. It is let's look at different socioeconomics and see if we can't get people from more diverse backgrounds that aren't necessarily a protected classification under the discrimination, gender, race, religion, things like that. Do you have any ideas on how people can proactively protect employees?
Well, I would say I think it's really talking to your executive team, your CEO, and understanding, tying it all into your culture and your virtues or vision, or not visions, virtues or values, whatever you call them, and really like being aligned with that. And if that's inclusive and creates belonging, then everything you're doing should be like, is that fitting our values? And so maybe there's an opportunity to reevaluate your values. Like, I just had an opportunity where we changed one of our values. It wasn't around this, but we did. We made the change. We announced it to our company this week, actually. And it's all about what we need to do as a business to move to the next stage. But it's also an opportunity here where you could evaluate it and make sure that it fits with keeping to the culture of inclusivity.
I'll also mention some of it, if you've got the appetite for risk, I totally encourage you to go out there and do all of the DEI things, right? It can actually be a very good marketing thing, even in this environment. I mean, look at all the attention Costco's gotten recently for saying, yes, we are going to support the DEI initiatives that we have. So if you have that appetite for risk, more power to you. There are other, like legal organizations that will also step in sometimes to help. Can't, rely on those, but if it does happen. And then also, some of it can be done quietly, right? It's one-off policy. It's how does your HR team actually want to address these things, right? How does corporate leadership want to address these issues? Even if the Pregnant Workers Fairness Act they take the abortion part out of it or the miscarriage, recovering from a miscarriage. Even if they take those protections out, that doesn't mean that your company can't still provide that time off, right? Mm-hmm. And, you could just say, look, sick time, if you need to take that time, take it. Just because the law is rolled back doesn't mean that your policy has to be rolled back, right? So it's to be very intentional about not only what the law is, but what is your policy and how do you enforce it?
Yeah, and I double down on that in regards to understanding your employee population. One company's employee population is going to want one thing more than another. And then if you go to a different company, it's completely different. So understanding what your employees want and what they value the most will be very beneficial for you to understand where you can, if you wanted to dial back, where you might want to actually dial up, even though the law, just because the law doesn't require you to do it, doesn't mean you can't do it, right? Like I know a lot of companies out there that have 12 weeks, 16, 18 weeks of paid paternity leave. That's not a legal requirement by any federal or state yet. We'll see if we ever get there, but they're doing it anyway. So just because you're not required to doesn't mean you can't take it to the next step. And again, hey, we're all trying to hire people, right? Companies are always trying to hire the best of the best. We have limitations in certain areas. Maybe this is one where you can really double down on and get candidates that really value that in your business.
Yeah. All right, so let's move over to our state law changes.
All right, well, before we do, is there anything else on the federal side? Tobin had asked earlier when we were asking, what do you guys want to hear about? He wanted to know, he or she, I'm sorry, I don't even know if it's a he or she, but Tobin wanted to know what changes we should be thinking about in regards to the 1099 contractors. So I know you talked about the independent contractor test, but is there anything else that we should be highlighting here?
Well, I was kind of saving some of that for the state law because California.
Oh, okay. Well, maybe we'll hold it.
California's doing
Tobin,
some action.
Stay on, and we'll get to it by state. All right.
Yeah.
Cool. But talking about state, so we said, lots of changes in minimum wage, and whoa, here it is. You might need to get your magnifying glass out. It's a lot going on. Lots of states are increasing, and as we said, federal's not. I don't know. They're stuck in the 80s. It seems like, 2009, but it feels like it's stuck in the 80s. So,
by the way, I'll send out the slides so you don't have to write all of these down.
Yeah, and with the recording. So we'll get this out to you guys. Some other key things to know. I'm not going to read this all off. You guys can read this later, but just want to call out that we have a couple of states that already are starting to show that they're going to be doing more increases, like Alaska, for example. They're planning to do $1 increase year over year for the next 3 years, including this year. So you do want to be very careful on that and making sure that you're planning for it accordingly.
I will say it was interesting that California voters voted down the latest increase. So while we have an increase here, it was supposed to go up even higher.
Yeah.
If that had passed. So, but we're seeing some of the minimum wages increase. And honestly, that is one of the best things that you can do for your employee recruitment and retention, right?
So I gotta ask, is this the first time in history, or at least maybe recent history, that California is not the most expensive minimum wage state?
Ooh.
I mean, by 16 cents, Washington is eking out.
Yeah, well, and also that is just the state minimum wage, right? There are cities and localities within California that have even different rates.
San Francisco, San Diego, and California.
So if you have employees in California and you are paying them at or near minimum wage, you need to verify the new rates and make sure that not just on the state, but the local level as well. And there's a couple other places. New York City has a different rate than the rest of the state. Let's
add more complication to it. And New Jersey has decided it depends on how many people you have at what your minimum wage should be. So if you have less than 6, you're at $14 and change. But if you're more than 6, you're over 15.
Yeah. Which, for a small company that is now growing, you're suddenly you hire that 6th, employee, and now you've got to change everybody's minimum wage. So
by $1 almost.
Yeah. So if you're in that situation, that is something to definitely be aware of.
So we also talked about the fact that lots of states are starting to bring in pay transparency. And if you're not familiar with it, primarily high level, what it is that it's a requirement for you to publish, communicate, share your salary bands, what you're going to be paying for an open role. So if you are a company that's located, let's say in Texas, but you are posting to hire some people in California, make sure you include your California range of what you're anticipating to pay or what you're willing to pay for the role on your job posting. Now, some states So all the pink that you see, I'm a very visual person. So here we go. Here's a bunch of pictures we're going to have of the United States here. All the pink states, that is active. If you are not posting your jobs with salary bands or a budget of expectation of I'm going to pay $100,000 to $110,000 for this role, you are not in compliance with the laws. The teal green states are ones that are coming, and they probably will start showing up from 26 to 28, maybe 29. But these are the ones that they're already talking about it. It's already in conversation now. It just needs to be passed. Now, the tricky part is, again, we have a couple of places where these pay transparency policies are different within a county or a city. So New York has a special county. Ohio has 2 cities. So do make sure that you are double checking your local area if there is any Pay Transparency Act going on, and also keep up with the potential 11 that are coming. But at this point in time, I work with a lot of remote companies and companies that are, spread out throughout the US. And I've just basically said, I'm done. It's happening. I'm putting it out on everything. I don't want to even try to keep up. I'm just putting it out there. And Kimberly, is it true that there are some states that it's not just putting it on the job posting? There's other requirements or maybe different requirements, right? So you got to be, it's tricky. Every state has to be its own special law. So make sure that you're diving into that. And some of these future states may actually already have some requirements. For example, they originally California was, well, you didn't have to put it on your posting, but if a candidate asked you, you had to tell them. Now it's on the posting. So some of these states might not be required to put it on your public posting, but you may be required to share it during a conversation if asked.
Yep. And a lot of these laws are not just about future employees, they're about your current employees, right? And that you have to disclose the pay ranges to them, and that, that can create, well, hey, if these people are getting paid more, I need to get paid more, right? So yes, that is definitely something that is an issue. And Angela asks, any requirements related to the pay range accuracy, and that a lot of companies post very wide ranges. I mean, I saw some that were like $1 to $1 million, right? We know that we can get much more accurate than that in these pay ranges. So, Angela, yes, I have actually seen enforcement actions based off of the accuracy. Now, if you particularly something that maybe is a commission-based role, that it's literally can be, all over the map. What we typically recommend is that we put the typical ranges, right? So, basically you can expect to be 75 to 150 for, 90% of our commission-based agents or employees. And then, but you could also be, our top earner is at 500,000, right? Or whatever it is. So some of those top things, they're iffy, right? But yes, we should strive to be as accurate as possible. Again, there's the thing that the law requires, and then there's the practical application, right? And part of that is when we post job ads, we get hundreds, if not thousands, of people applying to our jobs, right? If we can start by eliminating some of those just based off of the pay range, then we're doing our own team a very big service.
Well,
right?
And you're doing the candidate too. I look at this as a candidate experience opportunity. If you're providing a range that's realistic, then people who are applying are already somewhat committed to that range, agree that that's what they want to be paid. And you kind of are already shifting into okay, more about their skill sets and not making sure that they're a fit from a financial perspective. So I think it's done a lot of disservice to companies who do post a very wide range, because then you are going to get a ton of applicants that are very junior all the way to too senior based off of what you're looking for. And we know candidates talk. Glassdoor is out there, other places are out there. So why not give the candidate a great experience while reducing the burden on your team by just being a little bit more accurate? Now, I think the reason why it was originally done that way, my hypothesis would be, They probably weren't prepared to give a real range because they knew their internal employee, like the comp equity was not right and it was upside down, and they probably needed to take care of their current employees before they posted. Like if you have an inside sales rep that's making $57,000, but you post that you're going to pay $80,000, that's a problem, right? You're going to have a lot of people like very upset with you. So I think you also need to make sure, as you're looking at your ranges, that you are ensuring that your current staff is within that range, and or if not, be prepared to either hopefully fix it and get them in the right place, or be prepared to have a conversation with that person, or that they're going to leave. We have another question too from an anonymous individual that wants to know, is pay transparency only for FTE roles, or are they for part-time roles too? And I would say, yeah, it's for everything. I don't know about contractor roles, but definitely employee roles, you do need to, whether full-time or part-time, you do need to include that range. But Kimberly, do you have anything else to add to that?
Well, I would definitely say that most states are requiring it for the part-time as well as the full-time. And Mike asks, what about actual enforcement actions? Like what states? I'm aware of specifically Washington and Colorado. I think there's something pending in California as well.
That doesn't surprise me with California, but maybe the fires will distract them and will give you a little reprieve. Yeah. So then another follow-up question, is it okay to include salary expectations as a component of qualifying applicants? I think is the question, like, can you ask Greg is asking this question. I got a question for you, Greg, to clarify. Are you asking, is it okay for us as employers to ask a candidate what their salary expectation is? If that's what you're asking, then yes. A lot of states, you cannot ask what they're currently making, but what are they expecting is absolutely an okay question to ask. Wow, we got a lot of questions about this, Kimberly, and I think we got a lot more to talk about. So we're going to save these until the end. And if we don't get to them, Kimberly and I will stay on and record our answers. So that's part of the recording to ensure you all get your answers. I love all these questions. So keep going. All right. So more expenses to the employer. Here we go. Paid parental leave. Again, another map. And all the teal states have paid parental leave now, and states that are implementing it in this calendar year are pink, and what you can expect in purple for 2026. I expect that this will continue to grow and become more colorful in the next few years. But the new ones that are coming up this year, Delaware, Maine, and Minnesota. Actually, Minnesota is going to be in 2026, but I wanted to call it out here just in preparation. But our current states are all listed right there. And again, I will tell you, it is so complicated that if you have more than like 30, 40 people in your business, highly recommend looking at a leave management tool. There are several out there, Cocoon, Tilt. There's more that just my brain just spaced on, but it will behoove you, your ROI of not overpaying, underpaying, missing out on a legal law, getting lawsuits, to pay for that platform. It'll make your life so much simpler. I had a client who I came in, was helping them, found out that they actually overpaid 2 people on leave in a total of $46,000 because they pay 100%, up to 100% of supplemental pay in the first 12 weeks of leave. It's up to, because of course, the benefits that they have, short-term disability that they pay for, the state benefits that come through, that all gets added in, and then the employer will pay on top of it. Well, I came in, they wanted me to finalize, they were starting to come back, and I'm like, oh my gosh, you've overpaid, and trying to collect that is not an easy feat. I thought those people would actually just quit and SOL, but we were able to work through it and got that money back. But man, if they had just had a leave management, or if they had spent the painful time to research the California leave laws, that wouldn't have happened. And of course, again, some states, it's not just state, it's local. So San Francisco is a great example. They have their own paid leave law on top of California. So it does get complicated as you get into different cities, counties, and states.
Yep. Mike does make a good point. You also have to look at parental versus family, right? We've got new laws coming on that are like caregiver. So it's not just about if it's your child, but it could be if you are caregiving for another relative, like a sister or brother, no, sibling, parents, grandparents, things like that. I am in part of that generation that if I don't have kids, but if I had them, I'd be taking care of kids, but also parents and grandparents. And that is a very tough situation that's going on in my family right now that we're dealing with. But we're making do. So you definitely need to stay on top of the definitions of what this paid leave requires, right? So what family members qualify, right? Especially in California with all of the changes that they've made this year. There's a lot going on there.
And I had a typo here. And so thanks for calling it out. So the pink is actually what's already live. The teal is what's going live this year. Purple is 26. So apologies for the color miscoding. We will fix that in the presentation before we send it out with our recording.
All right. Then we have paid sick leave.
All right. I think this might be the last chart that we have for you guys. But again, if you're visual, I don't know, this really just helps me out seeing what's going on. So lots of states already have paid sick leave. Those are the teal states. And the states that are coming now has time off for any reason is in pink. And we know now that Missouri and Nebraska will be joining in 2025, but you can see they're not right away. So if you have any employees in those two states, you do have a little bit of time this calendar year to get that added into your tools, your policies, and communicate to your employees about the upcoming sick leave pay that will be available to them. And Kimberly, correct me if I'm wrong, but some states require it to be paid 100% by employers, and some states it's a portion of the employer and employee, and it's paid through the taxes. And I think some states actually it's just a policy that or a legal requirement that you have to offer it. So there's every state, again, every state's different, and you definitely want to look into the states you have employees in. And I think we also missed at the very beginning when we started talking about states, what is the state, what the employee gets to have in regards to state. So if you're I didn't say that right. If you're a company that's based in California, let's say, right, but you have employees that are working in Nevada, which state do you go by? And it's where the employee is working. So yes. I want to make sure that we call that out because that's a very confusing differentiator as well. So when you're looking at maybe your whole entire business is in Texas, but you have one employee in California, you better know your California laws because these all apply to them, even though they don't apply to the rest of your organization.
Yep. And I'm aware of so many lawsuits that have happened because employers are only applying their home laws and not the state where the employee is. So, things like we talked about the non-compete law earlier. Well, California had a notice requirement that went out, right? So that all the employees, when they codified their common law to say, non-competes are banned in the state, they also required a notice to go out. And a lot of people missed that notice. Right, because they were based off of, Pennsylvania, New York, Florida law, and weren't paying attention to the requirements in California. So definitely advise you to stay on top of that.
All right, go for it.
Workplace violence and guns, right? Another hot topic, politically charged issue. I've got clients in Texas that have had letters from the Attorney General saying you've got to let police officers carry in your location. I've had basically the opposite in New York where they're coming at you and saying, they're suing gun shops in Georgia. This happened a while back. There's all sorts of different things that are going on. So things that you need to be aware of. If you are in New York, brand new law that starts going into effect this year, and that is based off of workplace violence, that you need to have a written plan, right? A prevention plan, a training program in place that says, hey, this is how we're going to prevent it, identify it, respond to it, right? And then in 2027, I think it's 500 employees, but if you are a sizable employer, you have to actually have panic buttons that they can use to call the police directly, right? And it can be a cell phone based, but you can't require that employees use their personal cell phones,
Or
right?
in some states you can, but then you have to pay for them.
Right. So it's going to be very interesting about how this is implemented in 27 with these large employers to make sure that they comply with these laws. And one thing that I do highly recommend is that you have the proper insurance in place for workplace violence issues. I was talking with a risk manager recently that it's not just the incident itself, that because of litigation that goes on afterwards, it's a minimum of 1 year if the shooter dies, right? It's at least 2 years if the shooter lives. And we're seeing more of those longer ones because more and more they're not killing the shooters, right? And I hate to be that blunt, but the long-term effects on your company, you want that support that you would get from insurance, mostly on legal and PR, right? Are big parts of it. So don't want to spend too much time just on New York, but we've got all of these other states that are doing different types of workplace violence issues that's being addressed as it continues to spread. Jenny asks if these laws include remote employees or is remote staff exempt. I have not seen that issue really addressed too much directly in the laws that I've reviewed so far.
Yeah, my understanding is these are all regarding the safety, the workplace violence, the safety of your employees in in the actual office or manufacturer, wherever you are, that you have employees. So it's the physical building that your employees are. It's about that. So it's not necessarily about your remote staff, but I would say that it wouldn't hurt to have something in the training that they can go through and making sure that you have in your support, like if there is some kind of aftermath that happens, what support do you provide, and ensuring that those remote people are going to be included in that, being able to have that benefit, only because, people are traumatized by what they hear and see, and it necessarily isn't what they experience physically, but like in the physical building. So you do want to make sure that all of your staff is taken care of and protected, and it's a little bit of a burdensome on us, but it's the right thing to do.
The other thing is like Illinois' new law is about the employers can help get those orders of protection, right? If the employee is being harassed, right? So it can cover the workplace, it can cover home. So it could apply to the remote employees directly as well in that type of situation. And also I would say your policies need to cover if your employees are traveling, right? How often do they check in, right? What happens if they miss a check-in? Particularly if they're traveling internationally, but even domestically, you need to know basically where your employees are, what they're doing, and keep contact with them on a regular basis.
That's a good call out.
So the heat illness prevention issue, we've got literally two opposing policies going on here, right?
East Coast to West Coast.
Right. We've got Florida that's saying that the local governments can't require stricter requirements than the state does. And then you've got, certain California and Colorado especially that are increasing the protections for these heat related and this is going to apply a lot to your construction, agriculture, the people that work outside a lot, your amusement parks, things like that a lot of times are more blue collar workers, right? Heat illness prevention, we're not so concerned about it when we're sitting in an office, right, with air conditioning and everything, but it's definitely something that you have to focus on for your outdoor workers.
All right. This is the last state specific thing, and then we'll get on to predictions and talk fun stuff, right?
And this is basically a collection of things. It wasn't necessarily that we saw trends through the entire country, right? This was stuff that but we wanted to call it out because it was different enough that you need to be aware of it. And also, it takes one state and then other states will start catching on. Obviously, California is the one that's doing the most. I literally could do an entire hour on just the California changes, right? So I kind of lumped all of these together into different categories, right? The Crown Act, which is basically you can't discriminate based off of the hair, particularly for Native Americans, Black, people of color that have basically the non-white hair textures, like locks and dreads and things like that. That, if they're going natural, you can't be like, oh, you have to relax your hair and do all those things to it, right? Narcan needs to be in your first aid kit if you're in California. And I'll save the Freelance Workers Protection Act because that's going back to Tobin's question. And then we have tons of different paid leave issues. We have a new requirement for job posting, kind of similar to the pay transparency, but it's the reverse. You actually, if you can't show a job function for needing a driver's license, you can't require it, right? So if they're a driver for your, a delivery driver, taxi company, school bus drivers, things like that, yes, okay, you need a driver's license. But if you're working in a call center, you can't say driver's license required, right? Even if it's, because it's going to take too long to get to work or things like that. Whistleblower protections are increased. All right, so now let's talk about the Freelance Workers Protection Act. All right, so we're going to talk about the 1099 contractors here. And this is a new law in California that basically you need to have a written contract with all of your freelance workers. You have to pay them promptly, right? And, you got to be fair to your freelancers. We're seeing a lot of companies that are taking advantage of their freelancers and their independent contractors. And so this is trying to add to those protections. California also has its own independent contractor test that is different than the federal test, right? But this is something I can see spreading to other states to protect how they get paid and making sure that the deliverables are in a contract. So while we're on this, we'll talk about the contractors for a minute. We've got the DOL test, the California test, and the IRS test are our three main tests that we look at, right? So it's traditionally been a very long factors. I think it was 16 factors. And then it went down to like 3 under the Trump administration. So in the continual swing back and forth between Democrat, Republican administrations, we're expecting that we're going back to the pro-business, pro-employer test that allows for much more broadly categorization as a contractor.
So
right?
For the sake of time, Kimberly, I think let's jump into the predictions for 2025.
Okay.
We only have 3 more minutes left, and I know there's a couple questions I've been trying to answer through texting for time's sake. But what are your predictions for 2025? And man, I feel like that is ooh, that is a tough question to ask, not only with the change of government, but just the constant increase in AI and the agility and changes that are happening within the marketplace, within the economy, within the world. But give it your best shot. We won't hold you to it.
So we talked about DEI, the Trump administration being more employer friendly, but I do expect that there will be a surprise or two. I don't know what they're going to be, but there will be something. I expect the blue state versus red state debate to be even more polarized, as particularly blue states try to protect their workers against the changes that the Trump administration is going to have, right? As they try to roll back those rights, then you're going to see the blue states try to expand on their level. And then it's just going to become just a more polarization. Texas in the Fifth Circuit is going to continue to be pro employer, so pro business, and anything that is pro worker that they are going to try to halt, right? Um, that I pick on Texas in the Fifth Circuit because that's where a lot of it comes from right now. But I mean, there are other courts that are also they've been stacked by Trump. He's going to continue to put more Trump judges in there that are going to see that way across all of the circuits. Recruiting is going to continue to be both challenging and pro-employer at the same time. It's a really weird situation out there. Can you hear employees or potential employees complain about, hey, they're not getting callbacks and things like that, but then and employers are looking for unicorns, right? Mm-hmm. I get that, but also like sometimes it's tough to wade through thousands of applications to find that one and also to provide a good hiring experience, right? And recruiting experience. Because it's hard if you get that many applications to respond to every single one of them with a non-automated message, right? Or even just a good automated message. So
and let me add to that too, because I just realized as we're sitting here, we didn't talk about any of the laws that are implemented or about to be implemented in regards to how you use AI. And especially on the recruiting front, if you are using an AI tool in which it is helping you decipher whether you should hire Kimberly or Gwenevere, well, if you're hiring for a legal person, Guinevere's out, right? Because I don't let, I'm not a lawyer, but if you do that and you're not giving me, the candidate, an opportunity to opt out, in some states, you will have legal ramifications for that. So there are a lot of laws coming in to how you use AI and protecting employees or not, mostly protecting, so that you just want to make sure you're aware of that. And if you are using AI tools, something that I'm very excited about in regards to helping become more efficient in what we do, just make sure that those tools are following the rules.
Fractional leadership, which both I'm a fractional CFO and general counsel. And Gwenevere is a fractional HR person. On the executive level, that trend is going to continue. Happy to talk to you about fractional work and how it can help your company. We're also seeing a lot of remote workers return to office. If you are doing remote work, but even if you are doing in-office work, be careful of the fake worker scams. We're seeing this a lot. The person that shows up to the interview is not the person that shows up to actually work, right? So you've got to be careful on going through, again, that I-9 verification happens, can help you in this process, checking those IDs carefully to make sure that the right person's there, right? And being very aware of what's going on. I know we're at time. I'm free to stay on for a few more minutes. If you've got questions, I do want to make sure that you have all of our contact information. Again, we'll send out the slides and a recording for this, even with all of our technical glitches today. We will send this out for you. And, if you've got questions, feel free to contact either one of us, and we will be happy to, follow up with you. And if we need to engage, we can.
We got a good question, though, I want to say out loud. Hopefully I can hear me now.
Yes.
Catherine asked, would we consider doing a separate AI one? And I think, Kimberly, I would be open to doing some research and making that happen. So we will definitely look at making an AI specific law update, and we'll let you guys know. We'll post it out, and we'll give you an update once we have that ready to go, when you can join us, and we'll look forward to having you come back for that.
Yes, we could definitely do one on AI, probably in the second quarter, because I've got my first quarter all planned out, but we can definitely do that. And let's see, any other questions that we've got? Tobin, I hope that we answered your 1099 contractor question. I know it was up from the very beginning. So hopefully as we went through the presentation, we talked about it enough for you. Amanda, you said, can you dive into the nuance around employers not listing salary bands on JDs, but asking applicants what salary expectations are? So In the states where you don't have a requirement that you post it, obviously we have historically asked, what are your salary expectations? That's going to continue to be a standard practice, I believe, right? At some point, we have to have the money discussion, right? That is a critical term of employment. I'm not working unless I agree to whatever salary that you're offering me, right? So, one of the reasons behind the pay transparency is that you're basically having to disclose, you're basically staking out, you're making the first offer in the negotiation, right? Because that is such an important milestone in the negotiations, is who actually puts that out there first, right? And so, but yes, it is going to continue to be a question that we have to ask and answer.
As you can see, we're already 4 minutes over the hour mark, and we probably could have talked about a lot more. And of course, we didn't get into detail about anything. So this was really just a broad spectrum of what you should be aware of, so that if you're in that state and there's a pay transparency you have to do, or you're in that state and you have to do sick leave. Now you can go and research, what does that look like? What do you need to do? And or feel free to reach out to Kimberly or myself. We're happy to continue to support the conversation and help you get set up correctly. And we hope that this was a helpful hour for you all. We appreciate you attending, and happy 2025, everyone. And good luck getting through the year, and hopefully on to being able to be, I'm considering this a breakout year for me and for everybody that I know. So hopefully it's a breakout year for you as well.
Yep. Stay warm. I know I'm in Atlanta. It's cold down here. We're expecting snow. So for everybody in the Southeast in particular, stay warm. In California, I hope that you are safe and have no damage from the fires. But reach out and let us know if there's anything that we can do to help you guys as we go into 25 and make this a great year. Even with all of the change and chaos, we can still do great things together. All right. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.